welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian real estate podcast. When it comes to design, architects and engineers are always looking to incorporate innovative construction materials to bring their visions to reality and create iconic structures that are associated with them. But selecting innovative materials is often more than just a design consideration. Aside from being aesthetically pleasing, these materials often match required technical specifications for cooling, heat, light, soundproofing, fireproofing, or more.
One such material is technical fabrics or membranes, which are widely used across the world in structures such as stadiums, airport, building facades, and even in interiors. To talk about the structural quality, versatility, and increasing application of these materials across various projects, we have with us today Mr. Nitin Govila, the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for the APAC and MEA regions at Serge Ferrari, a producer and global supplier of technical fabrics.
Nitin completed his MBA from HEC in Paris and has close to 15 years' experience working in international strategy and sales of building materials.
Nitin talks us through the benefits and uses of these technical fabrics and gives us some insight into marquee projects of Serge Ferrari, such as the football stadiums at the Qatar World Cup and the iconic Burj Al Arab in Dubai.
So get ready to unravel the yarns of technical fabric applications in real estate. Nitin, welcome to Concrete Conversations. Thank you for taking the time to join us here. How are you doing today? How is your day going so far?
Thank you, Akshay and Ash, for having me over, and it's a great pleasure speaking with you. Doing fine. It's a bit cloudy and a mix of sunny out here, and it's in Singapore finally after 7-8 days where it's been continual rains. And
Right.
I know one of you are based in Boston, so the definition of winters there is very different. But for Singapore or Singaporeans, even being at 20 is like a winter. Huh?
Yeah, no, we can totally imagine. And since this is quite a global conversation we're having here. We're essentially 3 different time zones. I think before we even discuss anything else, I wanted to ask you, do you have any kind of hack that you use to get adjusted to time zones? Because I know you travel a lot for your job.
Well, first of all, and this is an interesting question people always ask. Actually, first of all, I don't think in my mind that I'm traveling different time zones, because sometimes I feel, when you start thinking too much, that mental element comes into the play and you start feeling tired. But so that's one thing. Obviously, I don't eat much when I fly. I try to then manage the sleep according to the zones
Right.
where I'm going to, so that, when I land in that country, you're already by default a bit tired. So when you sleep, so next day when you start the day in that country, you're kind of getting more or less adjusted to the time zones.
That's fantastic to hear. And since we're talking about the travel that you do for work, could you tell us a little bit about, how your career led you to where you are today with Serge Ferrari, and, what it is exactly that you do?
Yeah, so, my initial education, or my first part of my professional education, which is schooling and engineering, all happen in India. And as is very common in India, after a professional course of engineering or something, you end up doing an MBA, which in the classical way definition internationally is not really an MBA, but it's a master's, but we call it an MBA in India.
Right.
But it's the classical way it moved, and then I got a job through the campus. So it started with, in a way, to some extent, with building material in sales and marketing. So the travel part came by default because I moved between
Right.
west, north, and central part of India in that sense for my work. And after that, after 4-5 years, I wanted to move into a little bit more of marketing, product management, but still have the sales element. So I moved to Amul.
Right.
So those were 2 years in a small town in the western part of India. But by that time, it was already 7 years, and I felt professionally the world was also changing. I'm talking about early 2000. And I felt I really needed to upgrade myself. So that's where the need came to then really do an MBA. But obviously, having done in India, I felt that I have to explore outside.
Right.
And then after looking at various choices, personal constraints or whatever, I narrowed down on a certain MBA in France from HEC, which is now among the top two MBA universities across the world. In that sense, which also was a very interesting mix, because not only it had a full-time element, but it also gave an opportunity where I could, for 6 months, choose either I could do a specific project or a consulting project, or actually I could do a professional project working with a company.
Wow.
And those 6 months were very amazing and interesting, because that really set me on a travel journey across the world for the project I was looking for. And they liked my work at the end of it, and they offered me to start working for them full time after I finished my MBA. So that's where my real international journey started. So it was in the home automation sector, one of the world's, I mean, it's the number one company in the home automation sector in the industry. And then obviously Asia started coming up. That time, as you know, it was just the 2005, 6, 7, those times. So I moved into another French company which was in roofing, and start my APAC journey based out of Singapore. So last 15 years I've been in Singapore. I worked for that company nearly 7 years.
Right.
Then moved to the current company, which is Serge Ferrari, where obviously one more region got added, which was Middle East and Africa. So having, managing this kind of complexities and regions and countries, and also in a growing way, which means that one had to travel, one also had to, develop teams, work on strategies of market entry models. So all those things had to be done. So it meant that I had to spend time on the ground. This is where the real experience came, through meeting people, cultures, professionals, learning, sharing your perspective, and building a long-term sustainable business models across countries, across cultures and regions.
Right, that's fantastic. I think digging a little deeper into what you just said, can you tell us a little bit more about when you talked about the building materials and the architectural fabrics that is part of the product range at Serge Ferrari?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit, on the technical side of what that really is, just in layman's terms, just simplify it for us, for people who are not in real estate?
Yeah. So the classical technical definition, and then people call it in different ways, I mean, is a composite material. Okay.
Right.
Now, in a very layman sense, and it's unfortunate sometimes, and I face that challenge. If you go to some parts of the world, they will still call a tar, or they will call a standard material. But actually, people who are in the industry, they know, so they may call it technical fabrics. I would say the easier word, which whenever I talk to people, where they can, even though they will not be connected to this industry or may not know much, if I say technical fabrics, they understand it much easier than saying anything else. So whether I say tensile membranes or composite material, sometimes it's still technical and abstract for them.
Right.
But when I say technical fabrics, and I say technical fabrics for exterior and interior applications, and then I explain to them, like, if I say exterior, it could be big structures like stadiums, airports, walkways, shades, amphitheaters kind of structures, and I give them examples of certain landmark buildings. And interiors are like blinds, awnings, acoustics, or furniture fabrics. Then it becomes easier for them to understand, and it also differentiates with the classical understanding of fabrics, because people may associate fabrics either with clothes or curtains, or sometimes bed sheets and those kinds of things. Obviously, we are not in those markets. So if you ask me, technical fabrics is a much easier way, because it brings the technical element of it and differentiates also with the other fabrics or material which may exist in the market or the industry.
Right. And just to clarify, now we're talking about the materials and the fabrics. Is this more of a B2C structure? Is it more B2B? Is it a combination of both? Just to get a better understanding of how it works?
It is B2B.
Okay.
Purely B2B, because in the end, we are not a complete project executor.
Right.
So the whatever you see, let's take an example. I don't know whether you follow football or not. In Qatar World Cup, we have done 5 stadiums.
Oh, fantastic.
And one of them is actually designed in a kind of a Middle East Bedouin tent.
Right.
Both inside and outside is done by us. And I actually had the chance to go for one of the matches in that stadium. And I think 95% of the people who even came to watch the match did not even know that it's a technical fabric or a membrane in that sense. So so in that sense, so we don't do the final project. So those B2B customers, we call them as fabricators, because they have a big workshop, they will have a technical software, a design team, they will have a welding machine, because you need to use some technical elements, because you're taking wind load, other loads, structural loads and everything. So they have to do that, they have to validate that design, then they buy the roll of the fabric, and based on their forming and welding machine, they cut and weld, and they do the steel works, and then they will bring everything together to the site to do the installation.
Right, right. I think that gives us a very holistic picture of how the business side of this really works in terms of the value chain. Uh, what are some of the more in-depth specific applications, and what are some of the materials that go into making these products that enable them to work for these specific applications?
Yeah, so application, as I said, is interior exteriors. So exteriors would start from big structures, as I said, stadiums, airports, walkways, all shading structures, or any other places. You can have enclosed, inflated tents also, like in US in winters for sports facilities. Other exterior applications could be biogas, biomembranes, land refill covers, so those kinds of things.
Right.
When you come on the interior side, then you're talking about blinds, interior ceiling acoustics, those kinds of application, or furniture applications.
Right.
So it's a mix between different kinds of applications, as I said. Now, then the technical aspect comes. So the fabrics, or the technical fabrics, or the membranes which Serge Ferrari sells, they are of two kinds generally, or three, I would say. The primarily is the polyester yarns, which are coated with PVC. And the technical element comes with the mix of the yarns, what kind of yarns we are using, how they are woven, how they are coated, what kind of coating do we use, both sides, one side, the thickness. So all those elements then form the technical features or the data sheet of that particular fabric, which then accordingly, depending on the application or the requirement, you do that.
Right.
Then we have also glass yarn based PTFE coated, which are required. Sometimes all the big stadiums in Qatar were of these membranes, because they wanted a higher non-combustibility specification.
Right.
Then there is silicon based also, but these are very specific applications.
Right.
And we also have what we call as meshes or screens for blinds. Then you have a much more element which can be used for facades as second skin in front of your glass facades, which can help you regulate heat, light, and all other elements, but not blocking the view from inside of the building. So you can, for an architect or a designer, they can convert their imagination into reality, and each of them actually have an opportunity to create that one signature design and structure, which then they are is associated with that. So that's the beauty of a technical fabric.
Fantastic. So, Nathan, I think we've got a strong concept and context of the product offerings and the applications, in a sense, external and internal, and the way the products work. Diving more into understanding the breadth and scope of the products that we're looking at here, what are some of the hidden ways in which people may not be aware of, but it's just something as simple as soundproofing, or the right lighting, or the right materials that manage heat play into either in the workspace or in our houses, or in any environment? We talked about stadiums, etc.
So, I think building to building, it's different, and depending on the application. So now let's look at for example, a commercial building, right? Now I spoke about, say, a commercial building with a glass, or maybe even concrete for that matter. And I spoke about if you have a facade mesh. Now, generally, with concrete or with glass, there's a lot of heat which is already getting transmitted inside. So for sure, lines play a very important role. In the office layout, design, and everything. But let's not forget, the heat is already inside the glass. right? So the
Right.
bulbs will obviously protect the light, but can they help you to regulate the weather or the temperature within the building? Maybe not. Okay, but if you have a secondary skin, what we call as facade mesh, which is a porous material, a mesh, but a very strong one. What it does is that it has the capability to block nearly 80 to 85% of the heat outside, right? So, and people may think, oh, I will lose all the view through. No, you will not. You are able to still see that you still feel you're connected to the outside environment, but at the same time, inside you really get a good regulation of heat and light. So that plays a very key role, and obviously because of that much level of heat being blocked, you're able to then manage your air conditioning or heating loads, and then you kind of make a building more sustainable in terms of the energy usage, right? So that becomes a very key point. So again, it depends from building to building, depending on the kind of part of the world you are. You can play with that and also manage your electricity loads or lighting loads or air conditioning loads.
Right.
Right. Right.
Perfect. And now that we kind of know the properties of technical fabrics when it comes to possibly acoustics or even heat management, I wanted to ask you, given the potential use cases and different benefits, could you tell us about some unique applications where these fabrics have been used? I know you mentioned the stadiums at the Qatar World Cup,
Yes.
but are there any other marquee projects or applications that come to mind?
Yeah. I mean, marquee projects can be many. So, I mean, if you look at, say, in India, there's many of the cricket stadiums, airports, Delhi Airport, Mumbai, Hyderabad. There are many airports which have been done. We've done Infosys campus with the amphitheaters. For the employees, they've created a comfortable space. Those are the kind of applications which we have been doing. If you go in Middle East or any other part of the world, Middle East, Burj Al Arab in Dubai, as you see, that fabric has been there for 25 years. People don't even know. Many people don't even know that's a fabric.
Oh,
And
right.
that the white color which you see, the facade, it's a fabric.
Right.
It's a fabric made of glass yarns. It's been there for nearly 25 years. And it retains its same whiteness and cleanability and the functionality. And in that sense, and if you go to Europe, again, there are obviously stadiums or railway stations. If I talk about stadiums, then Roland Garros, the tennis stadium in France,
Right.
Right.
um, it's a movable roof. So the frames have been made, but the fabric has been put on those frames. So the frames automate and move inside and out, but the frames are not with glass or any other material. It's actually fabrics. So the each panel has been made of a fabric. So these kinds of applications. So this is I'm talking about exteriors and those kinds of things.
Right.
When you
Right.
go for interiors, if you go to China, and there are many stadiums in China, but a lot of railway stations and airports in China have been done by the inside non-combustible translucent acoustic fabric, which kind of is a milky kind of color, which in a way protects from the heat and light, at the same time gives good features inside, because sometimes where there are a lot of people, you need some non-combustible features. If you come to Singapore, the Jewel terminal, the inside has been done with the same fabric in that sense. The Bird Eye Stadium, which was used for Olympics and also the Winter Olympics, inside has been done by this fabric. So these are very key landmark things. Then when you go inside commercial buildings, a lot of corporate offices or big companies, the blinds would have been done. Obviously, you don't see that, so no, it's very difficult to take an image and talk about it. That's why most of the iconic projects are always reflected with the exterior projects and stadiums. In Russia World Cup, I think we did a couple of stadiums. In Brazil and in South Africa also, whenever there were World Cups, we've done many stadiums like that. So those kind of become the iconic ones, because the free flowing thing in Dubai Expo, 19 pavilions were done with our fabric, either for shading, either for facades, either for interiors, and everything.
Right. I maybe I'm fishing a little bit here, but I feel given the vast range of projects you've talked about, you definitely will have an answer to this. through any of these applications, or has there been any application where, maybe by industry standards, people thought, why would we ever use a fabric for something like this, or this particular fabric in this particular way? But you all have gone ahead and used the fabric in an application which had changed the way the industry looked at it, or changed the perception of how it could be used?
Yeah, so there are multiple parts to this. If I start from the one part, which is okay. Sometimes people, as I mentioned in Qatar, like people. So if you are looking at from the a visitor point of view, many times people will not even know it's a fabric,
Okay.
because in a stadium the roof is too far away.
Yeah.
Right. In a Qatar, the Al Bayt Stadium is a perfect example that it's of fabric, but I don't think so. People know. They may think, oh, it's maybe painted like that, drawn or painted, but so many people would not know.
Right.
There are two facets to it. Sometimes when these kinds of big projects are happening, then it's the top 10 or 20 architect firms or engineering firms who bid for it. Sometimes on big projects like this, which are huge projects, they even the architect and engineering firms have to bid for it, right?
Right.
So sometimes they will come with designs, or if the design has already been defined by the final client, then they may come up with other elements.
Right.
So many of these top firms over the years have used tensile membranes or technical fabrics, so they are aware of it. Now, not every firm for every project will always go with that. It depends. They will talk to people, they'll talk to the final client, the expectations, and they will make their designs with different materials, right? So there is one element of that which plays a role. Second element also plays a role, which is companies like us, and we have, I would say, proudly say, we are in fact the only one which have so many people on the ground. We nearly have 150 to 200 commercial people on the ground across the world, whose main job, one of the jobs, is to meet architects, designers, and work with them.
Wow.
Now, so that's where our people, they kind of work and act as technical consultants, try to also talk to them about all the different kinds of fabrics I've told you about, giving them also references of different kinds of projects which have been done. So we try to feed into the imagination of these architects and consultants, which then they may go back and think and say, okay, yeah, maybe using a membrane makes much more sense. And they will at the same time also ask for more details, more data submission, more sample submissions and everything, which is part of the job. So that's the way it works. Big project like this, like a stadium where the World Cup was played this year, the stadiums were already ready and done, at least, but the fabric part was already ready and done by 2019.
Right.
And another question that I had, listening to all of this, obviously, this would depend on the application in question and the specific fabric that's being used. But as you said, when your company reaches out to architects and explains to them, where, or works with them to see where these materials could be used, is sustainability a part of that pitch? Obviously, again, depends on the product, but are these applications of technical fabrics, can it be more sustainable than the traditional facade materials or construction materials that they are replacing?
Yes, true. It is, and it is being expected a lot more in the way more and more questions are being asked. End of life questions are being asked.
Right.
Usability of the questions are being asked. How the material can be recycled are being asked. I mean, just to give an example, London Olympics. That there was one stadium which was done and used fabric, and it used ours only on the condition that they knew that at the end of the stadium, at the end of the Olympics, that whole fabrics will be taken off and sent to a recycling plant in Italy, which was our partner company, and that's the way they worked on it. We are internally working on a internal project funded by our group and our shareholders, which is creating a concept, in a very modular concept, that the yarn, the fabrics can be recycled back to usable yarns, which actually we would like to use it back again in production of our new products or new ranges. So it's becoming a key question. So, and it's many things, sustainability is so wide. One part of sustainability is about the materials which are used.
Right.
But in a membrane does not, fabric is not made like that. You have to source the yarns. You have to source the resins. You have to source the composites, varnishes. Now, sometimes they will go to the extent to know whether those kinds of materials which you are sourcing, whether those companies have proper sustainable management processes or not, right?
Right.
Then when you make the product, after that, what's the end of life? how can you convert or not convert? That's one element. The other element is, now between different materials, when I make my building, is it an energy consuming building, or can I save energy? Can it be classified in different categories of LEED or other categories of rating to make it maybe a platinum one or maybe anything else? So then that comes as a second question, which is coming from the design. And then design means which kind of material you have to use. Then the third part would be, which we talked about, the workplace design in that building. Now, if it's a hotel, or for that matter, it's a commercial building, how do you design the workplace so that not only you make a good space for people's well-being and working, but at the same time, you're also conserving energy. So there are many elements on sustainability which are being raised now more and more. Obviously, it's an interesting challenge, and we all realize as a company, it's not about, we have to change just because we want to sell more, but it's also the responsibility of us as individuals to understand, yes, that's a challenge, and the biggest thing, energy costs are going up. So how do we save? How do we manage that? So it's an important part. Our R&D is always working on X amount of projects every year, taking into account these elements, which is becoming more and more as we go along. So it's a key part. We have a very key message which we call in sustainability is plus equals zero, meaning, okay, we want to do more, not only in our product but in our business, but in the end the impact has to be zero.
Right.
So that's driving our key message also.
That's a fantastic message. I think you've highlighted a few interesting touch points. You talked about, the changing trends globally, and you talked about different ratings for different types of projects. So I think taking a step back, looking more broad perspective here, you've worked on projects, I think, across 3 different continents that we've talked about in this, maybe 4 different continents that we talked about just in this conversation. When you talk about working across global markets, there are 2 big questions that come to mind. The first is, how do we ensure, or how does the company ensure, you're talking about variability in terms of design requirements and material preferences, also different tastes in different markets, but standardization in terms of quality. So on one side of it, and then on the second side of it, you're talking about supply chain management and supply chain dynamics in different countries, different continents, different parts of the world.
I think one thing on the technology part which is critical, and that's why most of our manufacturing is in France and Germany, because as I said, a standard tarpaulin or something anybody can make, it's not complicated.
Right.
But we don't want to be in that business. But to make a fabric for a stadium which can last 25, 30 years, perform similarly as it performed on day one, and at the end of 25, 30 years, you definitely need some technical elements and knowledge and expertise. Now that's our USP, that's our intellectual property. So obviously it means that we have to ensure that we are able to control that, manage that, and protect that. So we do that. Now in the end, because it's still an intermediate product, as I said, it goes in rolls, it goes in boxes. So shipping is not an issue. It's hardly a very important cost of the product cost for a client.
Right.
So easily we can manage that, and we have warehouses across the world to support people and customers whenever they need immediately also, or based on project pipeline, we know the timing, we can manage that. So for me, that's not an issue. For sure, there are other building materials, and I worked in my previous company, which was roofing, where it became much more important to be locally present, because the cost of shipping and transportation and how much can you send in one container in terms of square meters of coverage,
Right.
that became sometimes not practical or feasible, to transport. Okay, you had to do, but in the end, it was making you uncompetitive. So definitely in building material, it's very subjective. Cement is one example. If very rarely you'll be seeing cement transported, even even in a big country, from one area to another, from west to east or north to south. Forget about between borders and countries and shipping. So it all depends on the type of material and everything. And then obviously norms keep on changing, and that's our job. We have to study that. You also have to then ensure you're doing the right testing. So the fire test, the tensile stress, the other
Right.
there are different norms from Australia, from Europe, from Asia and Americas. So the companies which are able to qualify for all that, obviously you improve your competitiveness and differentiation when selling in a market.
Right.
Right. Um, right. So now that we've kind of covered, a broad range of subjects when it comes to tensile membranes in construction-related applications, I wanted to ask you, given the versatility, of these materials, are there other different industrial applications that you look into as well, whether it's in terms of, infrastructure projects or energy projects or anything like that?
Yeah, so industrial application, I would call a biogas dome or a balloon, which where the biogas process, obviously technology could be different, but in the end, you need a structure where the processing of that happens, right?
Right.
So earlier the old designs were always concrete. Last few years, and in Europe, it's been very common. They use double skin membranes. So we have a very good product on that, very specific product. We are now taking advantage of the investments and the government policy, which obviously they announced a CBG investment of a big number in the coming years to be supported by the government in this sector, the biogas sector, the energy created through that. So obviously that's one application. We have products which are for pond liners, to store water. With the climate change, you see sometimes all the ski locations, they are not able to get enough snow. So what they do is they store water and they convert this water to snow so that the ski stations can keep running. There, how do you protect water that it does not seep into the ground? So that's what we call as water storage and pond liners. We also have products for fish farming, for salmon,
Oh, wow.
which is used mostly in northern deep fish for salmon, where the output of the salmon increases, the quality and productivity increases. So those kinds of things. Instead of making concrete tanks for fish farming, you can use fabric. So it ensures that you're able to remove the waste much faster, and so your output of the fishes and the quality of that also improves. Then we have military products also,
Wow.
depending anti-radar and all those kinds of things. So yes, there are many industrial products we have, but then they go for a specific market, working on a specific application, and there are different regulations in different countries which are very unique and specific. So you have to work accordingly on that.
Fantastic. I think that's a great holistic note to bring this conversation to a wrap on. Nitin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Concrete Conversations. I can say with absolute certainty, it feels like you've given us the right threads to build our own fabrics with this conversation, and I'm sure listeners will feel the same way about this.
No, I mean, I'm very happy. I mean, I think it's interesting to be able to talk of many facets of our business. Obviously, the challenges, opportunities, but what all we are doing. And through your questions, I mean, it's given me an opportunity to talk about that. So thank you for that. Thank you also, that you're able to bring out all these elements, which I'm sure the audience will love. And I hope what I've shared could be useful to them. And I'm more than happy to have a further detailed discussion with any of them if they wish to contact you or me and to know more on that. Yeah.
Certainly.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind the scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.